I'm Antony Gormley, I'm a sculptor. I guess sculpture appeals to a certain island mentality of self-reliance and bloody-mindedness. And I think we like to hoe our own row and somehow be practical. I think there's not so much idealism and quite a lot of wanting to investigate the material world, and it's a different kind of sculpture, I think, to maybe the tradition of European sculpture generally, and somehow the bricoleur side of every Englishman has a shed, and in the shed they kind of become themselves, because we're all a little bit repressed and a little bit shy, and we need a little place to kind of find ourselves in putting things together. Some Englishmen make bicycles or flying machines, or just potter about mending things in their sheds, but some of us make sculpture. Not really. I mean, the British Council sort of promoted us as the new British sculpture in the late 70s, and certainly, you know, I was sent to the Sao Paulo Biennale, the Venice Biennale, the Milan Triennale, always by the British Council and always in some way part of this idea of a new movement. But of course, it was entirely made up, because even though we knew each other and there were certain associations, there was not really a movement. It wasn't like we published a manifesto and we were a group of individuals who all came out of art school at the same time. And I think that's what made it a good time. Very different voices, all, I think, very committed to the idea of making objects that would change people's minds as they hopefully changed ours in making them. It's a funny thing, isn't it? We just come from the Venice Biennale and the, in a way, rather 19th century idea about national schools and national. I don't think of myself really as a English artist. I mean, it's not terribly relevant to me. My mother was German, my father was half Irish, half English. I have shown my work all over the world from a very early age. I, you know, was visiting many countries in Europe, and by the time I was 20, I'd visited most countries between England and India, and I think of myself, as a citizen of the world, not particularly as an Englishman. So you could say that culture can be used by national governments to promote and advertise themselves. Sometimes it can work, sometimes it doesn't, and I think in the case of the Damien Hirst generation, I think that they seem to work, and they seem to be happy with the Union Jack and sort of fish and chips and a kind of stereotypical image of red buses and bobbies with hats. But I was never very interested in that, and it's a form of cultural packaging that I would somewhat question. I think that I'm very, very interested in indigenous culture, but what constitutes British or even English culture is very difficult to define. And in this time of migration, where they're trying to get people to take an Englishness exam before allowing you right leave to stay or nationality seems to me a desperate attempt to try to find something that probably doesn't exist. Well, certainly, you know, art schools, I mean, we all, if you think of all of the people you've mentioned, so Richard, Tony, I suppose Anish, certainly Alison Wilding, Peter Randall Page, and I suppose the previous generation, all of us had an incredible art school education. The art schools of the 60s and 70s were amazing places. So art schools were places where people who didn't otherwise fit in could find a place and do exciting things and be part of a community of trying things out. And it was really, particularly foundation courses were places where you went and you thought by messing about with different materials and mediums. Art schools were populated by living artists who lived by teaching. Some of them were famous, some of them were not famous, but all of them were examples of people who cared about making, for its own sake, making new things. And they were lively places, and the belief in a liberal education that was possible through art, I think, was the reason that there were so many really original and powerful talents that came out of art school. I think by leaving your own culture, you can look at it as if for the first time from outside, and that's always a good thing. And you may have taken my previous comments as being somewhat negative about, as it were, Englishness or what it means to be in Britain, but I think, you know, having travelled quite a lot, and particularly in the East, I think the experience of another culture that is not based on a desert religion and monotheism, that doesn't really value certainly in the time that I was there, doesn't value the dominance of market values over the real quality of life. I think that was incredibly important to me. But the most important thing to me was learning Vipassana meditation and realizing that all of this so-called classical English education that I'd had was actually less important than simply concentrating on being. And I think learning with Goenka how to observe life as experienced in a body, and realizing that was more valuable really than anything written in a book, was incredibly important. To value being over doing, to value, in a sense, the quality of being, and to recognize it, to see an emotion arise, a feeling arise, and to somehow acknowledge it, but not to identify with it completely, so that I think the whole experience of Buddhist philosophy, not as a piece of information or knowledge, but as direct experience. Yeah, that was a wonderful gift, and I think I wouldn't have become a sculptor in the way that I have without that experience. Making art is a form of thinking through making, thinking through touch and sensation. I don't think you can be taught. It is about sensibility that is independent of technique. You can be taught 1,001 techniques, but if you don't have the sensibility, there's no point. The thing about art school is that this is a community of interest, which hopefully allows different people with different perceptions to come together and in some way help each other to see and to feel. And that's why they're good. It's not because there's a hierarchy of power, people with more knowledge and less knowledge. It's just an open space in which people can experiment and in a way, energize each other. And I think that art schools, when they are good, when they are open, when the primary engine of instruction, you might say, or interest, is actually the body of the students themselves and their mutual regard, their mutual competition, but also respect. And this is what makes a good art school. It has to be open, but it also has to have, in a way, a spirit of the highest expectations of what art can be, and indeed how it can transform the individual and hopefully society. I think it's only essential insofar as these environments in which creative people come together, maybe for the only time in their life. It's a very short time, 3, 5, maximum 7 years. And this experience of, in a way, a shared location in which different kinds of creative intelligence and souls can grow together is absolutely. I think it's essential. I think it's an essential part of you could say, the individuation of an artist. All of us who've been lucky enough to go to art school, I think, recognize it. Collaboration is one of the great joys, I think. Collaboration suggests that you can come together with the possibility of a time. I mean, I've collaborated a lot with dance, and for me, this is escape from the long and arduous sort of development of a sculpture that always takes time and through many processes. But working for a dance, you have an event, you have a limited time, but you're working with real people, with a group of dancers, with a particular stage often in mind, and as a foil to the life of the studio, collaborating with dancers is a joy for me. I personally think that the failure of modernity was that not enough artists were trained or interested enough to contribute to the common ground or to collective space. And if we think of the 20th century, in a way, sculpture began to recede into the interior. It became institutionalized. There didn't seem to be a common symbolic order that allowed sculpture to somehow do that same job of reinforcing the central beliefs, hopes, fears, histories of a place. What is a city? A city is an expression of shared collective value. It should be a place of inspiration where people come together and share things that they weren't otherwise able to share. If the texture of the city doesn't include, as it were, the things that give us joy or that give us trouble, as it were, imaginative carriers, then the city has failed us. I think I made this show very much in relation to the Human show in the Forte Belvedere of 2 years ago, and that was about mass. And Mario was quite right to say today that this is about energy. This is about space and light and experience. It's still about the body. The body is the body of every single viewer that comes into the field of the work. And I was very keen in relation to what we were talking about, you could say, the social space of art, to make a work that takes this place of spectacle in which there is an auditorium that normally contains a passive audience that does nothing but simply gives their attention, to then the spectacle that is the other side of the proscenium arch. I wanted to meditate on what the nature of theatre and the nature of spectacle was and transform it. So we have taken out the lights, we have then allowed the building to have its lights, but then unified the dialectic between the stage and the audience or the auditorium, and treated it absolutely in the same way, and thereby made an instrument of auto-observation, of proprioception. You bring your own body, you make your journey through this field of interruptions, and become the viewed for other viewers. So it's also an instrument by which the viewers become the viewed. So this healing of the dialectic between, you could say, actor and acted upon, or the spectacle and the audience, also creates a social space in which the art is an experience and a space, not an object. Because I absolutely believe that actually it is art as an open place of first-hand experience. It has nothing to do with the making of an image, the creation of a narrative. There's plenty of narrative in there, but it's absolutely intrinsic to everybody's journey. Those journeys are, in some senses, shared and visible by everybody else, because the trajectory of your movement through that field leaves these vibrations, and for several minutes after someone has passed. So this is a kind of, for me, you could say this is a kind of utopian proposition. This is liberating the zips from a Barnett Newman painting into 3 dimensions. Thinking about the space of art as a resonator for human energy, a ground against which we feel and re-experience our own bodies and the thoughts and feelings within them in an intense way. The nature of the work is that it enforces a kind of choreography. We have to walk in a way that is not mechanical. We are dislocated from a goal-orientated form of movement. Normally, we don't notice our own walking because in our minds is the destination. I wanted to slow everything down and just allow this, both for the viewer and for the experiencer, to become a moment where you had to, in order to remain standing or remain moving, be highly conscious of your balance, your route. You have to concentrate, and in the process of concentrating, your body is liberated from, as it were, the norms of locomotion, of walking, of a goal-orientated form of movement. And to that extent, I hope that Lost Horizon is a way of returning us to our own lives, to our own experience, to the shared nature of our collective experience freshly, in order to allow life itself to be the thing that is contemplated.